Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bio. Today I'm joined by Elisabeth Valentine. Elisabeth is a voiceover artist, singer, speaker and performance coach. She's been a professional performer since the age of 8 and lends her voice, expertise and coaching to some of the biggest brands in the world such as Disney, Apple, Netflix, BBC, My Little Pony and so many more. Elisabeth also coaches people on their public speaking, pitching, presentation and networking skills. And she's the host of the Dare, Share, Create podcast and author of Voice Over Secrets. She's also got a video course and a book on how to record an audiobook, a step-by-step guide to bringing your audiobook to life. And that's exactly why I've got Elisabeth on the show today to talk all things audiobooks. So let's get stuck in and do stay tuned to the end where Elisabeth has an offer just for Beyond the Bio listeners. Welcome to Beyond the Bio, Elisabeth. It is great to have you on the show today, talking all things audiobooks.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Sophie. I'm really excited. And I am really excited about audiobooks because it is such a great medium and very, very necessary for authors now, especially of nonfiction, to get their audiobook made.
Well, you've kind of gone into my first question there because I've got 2 books out already that have been out for a while and I've never recorded an audio version of either of those. So tell us a bit more about how important an audiobook version actually is.
Well, it is important. And actually, I just looked up some of the newest stats because, of course, they come out all the time. And in the UK, over the past 5 years, nonfiction sales of audiobooks have actually risen by 74%, compared to fiction, where it's only 41%. And I think these days, people want to hear it from the horse's mouth. They want to hear it from you, they want to hear it from the expert. And we can obviously see that so many more people are choosing to listen to books and absorb it that way because it just fits with their lifestyle better, or they retain the information better because, of course, lots of people actually aren't great readers. So audiobooks are just opening up a whole new extra segment of your book. And I think also now, with AI on the rise and there's so much non-human things are going to be coming out, so building your brand, which is obviously what you're talking about, building visibility, your voice is a really key part of your personal brand. And it's such a big part of your personality. So when you are doing the audiobook yourself, you are speaking directly to your audience and they get to connect with you in a different way to when they are reading the information. And I'm sure you've heard that saying. It's very big, I guess, in business things, like we buy from and do business with people we know, like, and trust. So actually having someone listen to you conveying all your great information, all the stuff that you're all about, that is hopefully going to change their life or their career for the better, when they're listening to you delivering it, it's just connecting that to you even more and cementing their trust in you as that authority or expert. And also, if it's someone who isn't that familiar to you, it's a great way of them to get to know you and feel your vibe. Who are you? And by listening to someone speak, we do get that sense of who they are.
Okay, I'm sold and I'm planning on doing it for book 3. So I am in the zone with this. Really interesting there, the stat around the increase in consumption with audiobooks. Do you know what that stat is in relation to people consuming other formats of books?
I am not 100% sure, but I had a look at some of the other stats. Well, what we know is that print books have declined slightly, whereas audiobooks has just risen. And the Audio Publishers Association's their sales survey from 2023 said that we've now had 11 consecutive years of double-digit growth in audiobook sales. And I read somewhere that they're expecting it to rise by 20% ish every year till about 2030. And so I think in the US alone, they were saying that now 51% or 54% of people have listened to an audiobook compared to, I think, 45% last year. And then obviously it's risen since then. So that means that 170 million Americans have listened to an audiobook last year.
Wow, that is significant. I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking, it was an author talking, and he was talking about the split of his book sales. And it was the guy that wrote Profit First, right? So he's quite a prolific author, and that book does really well. And I think he was saying, I'd have to go back and double check, but I think that he said for his book, it was over 50% that were listening to it, followed by print, followed by Kindle, which I think probably makes sense for his kind of content. And I just thought, wow. And, if I wasn't already convinced that I needed to do an audiobook this time, that stat would have convinced me, because I feel like I'm probably missing out. And yeah, I can totally get that whole thing around the know, like, trust thing. And I guess that leads on to my other question, which again, you've kind of answered around, should it be the author or should it be a narrator? So you've said there, it should be the author. Are there ever any circumstances where a narrator might be better?
For sure. I think for a non-fiction book, it should ideally be the author. However, not if they can't do a good job. That is the caveat. And it's actually one of the things that I teach is that we go through these different ways that you can improve on your voice and your delivery. But if you kind of work on getting up to scratch, so to speak, and it's still not quite right. Let's say also maybe you have a very strong foreign accent and you want to do your book in a language that isn't your mother tongue. And by the way, people can totally do that. They just have to work harder to be understood. So they have to speak slower, they have to really enunciate, they have to really practice how they speak, because some people are going to be turned off. But let's say you've practiced, you've tried your best, but your delivery just isn't good. You can't get the words out. You keep stumbling. Then a narrator would be better. And it's interesting. Nowadays, we are judging everyone compared to the top. We're judging everyone compared to the top 1%. And whether that is when we look at someone's social media, and it might be subconscious, we might not even think about it, but I want, someone who is maybe at a beginner stage or a mid-level stage. I'm still judging their production value against someone who is ridiculously famous, who's got millions of followers, and who've got a team doing everything. We're still competing in that space.
It's tough, isn't it? Because I do exactly that, and you're not going to give people leeway because they're not quite in, at that level yet. So I think they are really important things to think about. Let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of actually recording an audiobook. How long does it typically take to record an audiobook?
Well, so how long is a piece of string? It depends how long your book is, really. And it depends how you do it. So some people like to go into a studio for, let's say, 2 half days or 2 full days and,
Blast
bang,
through
get
it. And do you think that's better? So someone like me that has my own studio who could record, I could do a chapter a day for the next 2 weeks and do it that way. Is it better to do little and often, or is it better to just blast through it? I mean, does your voice sound different? It might change week by week.
Your voice might sound different, but your voice will also change if you're doing a whole day in the studio, because it's going to get tired. So I would say, as a professional voiceover artist, and I've been a professional voiceover artist for over 15 years, my voice gets tired. And because I'm so used to it, I recognize when my voice is getting tired. But you get listener fatigue. So you might not be able to hear it after a while. So I would say I would never book a whole day in a studio. I think it's unrealistic, especially if you're not trained. For some people, this is all they do. Yeah, they can probably do it. But I would say half days booking at the most. And even in that half day, you're going to want to take breaks. And you can't record for that long anyways. I mean, in sort of long stretches. I mean, how I've recorded my audiobook that I've just done, I did a couple of chapters in a go, but I did take proper break in between the couple of chapters I would record at a time, and then leave it. And then when you come back the next time, what you want to do is just play back some of what you recorded the day before, so that you hear, okay, where is my energy? Where is my voice? How did that sound? What was my pace? And this is what we do when I've worked as a voice director or talent coach on other projects. We would always have these match files. So we would always go back and go, okay, what were the things where we thought, oh, this is really capturing the energy. This is really where it's, oh, that was so good. Let's match that. So then you just play it back. Then you can say it back. Oh, yeah, this is where I need to be.
That is great advice. That is great advice. And then when you're reading an audiobook, are you literally reading it? You know, say I've got a printed copy of my manuscript in front of me, which is what someone buying a print version or the Kindle version would read. Are you literally reading it as that, or do you need to add anything in to do an audiobook version?
Yeah, so you do need to make some slight changes. For instance, do things make sense? If you have written down, you will read more about this in chapter 10, then that's not what you're going to say. You're going to say you'll hear more about that in chapter 10. Let's say you have a bunch of illustrations that you want maybe the audience to see. So are you going to create a accompanying PDF document? Are you going to have a resources page on your website that you can refer them to? So things like that you want to think about when you go to create your audiobook script. And what if you have footnotes? How are you going to deal with those? And there I would say we want to make it an enjoyable experience for the listener. We want to keep it in the flow. So if you keep going, footnote, what, is that going to break the flow? So how do you want to deal with those footnotes? Do you want to do maybe at the end of each chapter go footnotes, blah, 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 blah. And you would perhaps say that in the introduction. Throughout this audiobook, I'm going to be referring to the footnotes. You can find them there.
And maybe you could list those out on your website as well, just so that you're not reading a load of references out, which sounds a bit clunky maybe.
Very clunky. And yeah, so things like that when you go to prepare. And one of the things I harp on about is that people should read their book out loud before they go into the studio, because that's where you're going to catch those things that are like, "Oh, that doesn't really work. Okay, can I make a small change here?" Don't make obviously massive changes because your book is your book, but where are the little tweaks that are going to make sense for the audio version of the book?
Got it. Do you need specialist equipment to record an audiobook?
Well, you do need specialist equipment. So, of course, you can't just read into the microphone of your laptop or your phone. You have to have a microphone. But these days, there are lots of actually really reasonable, really good options out there for you. You will need a pop shield, which is like a little round piece of thing that's got fabric in it, and it's just catching some of that excess air. So we know when we're listening to people speak, and if they have bad microphone technique and you hear that, that's that air hitting the microphone, which makes an unpleasant sound. So we want a pop shield, which is, by the way, you can get one for like 8 or 10 quid. And then you will need to, depending on what microphone you get, so you need a condenser microphone, which is different from a dynamic microphone, which is the ones that you see people singing with on stage. So it's just a much more sensitive microphone. And that's what we want when we are recording speak. And you can get two kinds. So you can get one that is connected with a USB, so that goes straight into your laptop. Or you can get one that is connected with what we call XLR cables. But I would say nowadays, the USB mics are so good that if you are just going to be recording one audiobook, maybe some podcasts, then a USB mic will be great for you. And then you will need to have a room to record in. And actually, that's a lot more important than the microphone per se. But the room is important because we want it to be obviously where you're sitting now, you've got the lovely soundproofing behind you. If you are building a home studio, you need to pick a room well. So often a room with soft furnishings in is going to be great, like a bedroom, because we want to avoid that echoey sound that we get when, for instance, you walk into an empty house and there's no carpets, there's no furniture, and you get that wow wow. So that sound is bouncing off of the walls. That is the most important thing to avoid. So you want to make sure that it's away from washing machines or pipes or things that can make external noise. And you probably don't want to be right next to a single glazed window and there's a busy road outside.
So, if the sound quality is impacted, if you were to upload it to Audible, for example, would they just reject it? Like, they must have strict standards, right?
They do have quite strict standards and they've got very strict specifications for the noise levels and the sound. Yeah, so the noise floor is basically what is the background noises here. And they do have fairly strict rules on that, which is why I would always really encourage people, if you are recording it in a home studio setup, which you totally can do, by the way, is to spend a couple of £100 working with a sound guy just to make sure that he sets up the sound so you sound the best you possibly can.
Yeah, it sounds like spending a couple of £100 on that is going to save time and potentially money later on if it had gone wrong. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I have people I work with who I recommend because they'll just do a nice setup for you. You can contact them if all of a sudden you're like, it's not working, and and I had this not too long ago where I was like, what's going on? And I know my equipment really well, so I called up the sound guy and he was like, oh, sounds like, did you press that one button? And I was like, oh, and this one button had accidentally been pressed somehow. And I was like, and then everything worked beautifully. But when you don't know that, then it's a nightmare to try and figure out. So I definitely say get someone just to check and check the audio levels. Is it in the right space? Because can you imagine if you record your whole book, you upload it, and Audible goes, sorry,
Uh-uh.
and then you have to do it all again.
I guess the other thing you probably need to think about if you are recording at home or doing it yourself would be you'd still need to invest some money in having it edited, right?
Yes. Yeah. So what you could do, and I encourage people actually to edit it themselves somewhat. So what you can do is you can actually edit out your outtakes or, oh, there was a mistake. And I have like a nice little template where I go, okay, is it a mistake? Then what needs to happen and when has that happened? So, okay, that needs to be re-recorded. Is it a not a mistake, but maybe a stylistic? Oh, do I love it? Do I sound a bit tired? Am I a bit, did I make a weird phrase on this? But it's not wrong per se. And then you have a choice. It's like, can I live with it? Or will it continue to annoy me? And then there might be another category that is audio related. So is there a lot of clicks there or has some background noise come in or whatever? So what needs to happen to fix that? But then I would say sending it to an audio engineer. And by the way, it's not that expensive. It really isn't. But just making sure that it's all taken care of. And everyone who is writing a book is an entrepreneur, is a business owner, maybe is a parent. It's like, how much time do you have? Because you can do it all yourself. But the time and the energy, is that best spent for you to learn everything? Or
Exactly.
is it best spent to outsource it?
Exactly. So we've mentioned Audible a few times. Is that the only place people list audiobooks these days, or are there other platforms available?
Well, there are, but I've actually only focused on Audible because it is the biggest audiobook platform in the world. Now, depending on where your territory is, you might want to look at other ones because Audible, the territories, it's in the US, the UK, Japan, Germany, Australia, France, and one more that escapes me. So if your audience is somewhere else, for instance, I'm from Denmark, and there we have Mofibo, and they're the biggest one. But obviously that's just for the Danish market. So Audible, I would just go with them, and then it gets published on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. And you can choose though, because you can choose to either do a exclusive deal with them, so then you get 40% of the royalties, or you can choose to do a non-exclusive deal if you think, well, I also want to distribute it there and there, then you get 25% of the royalties. So
you've
that's kind of,
got to weigh it
but
up, see where your audience is.
yeah, pretty much.
And is it possible to, I feel like I know the answer to this question, but I guess it's possible for you, if you've recorded it at home and you've done all those bits that you've said yourself, you can upload it yourself to Audible, right? You don't need a publisher?
No, you don't. So all you need to do is the book has the print version of the book, or the Kindle, it can also just be a Kindle version, has to be published on Amazon, because they link the audiobook version to the physical copy of the book. Yeah. So it just has to be available on Amazon. And then what you do is there is a platform called acx.com, which is owned by Amazon, and that is where you will publish your book through. The process is quite simple. So you basically set up an account. You will need to put in your tax information, because obviously it's US based. So you just need to put in your tax information. It's very simple. Then you need to link the audiobook to the physical copy of your book. And then you basically upload the audio files and the cover art, which, by the way, you need to make sure that you have specific cover art made, because whereas a book is rectangular, the Audible is a perfect square. So you want to make sure that you've got the rights for the cover of your book so that you can use it, or you need to just create new artwork. It doesn't have to match. But the title has to match exactly what the title of the book is. And that's basically it.
And you can launch your paperback, Kindle, and audiobook all at the same time. You don't have to do it in a particular order.
Yes. So no, it just has to be.
They've just got to be linked.
Yeah, they just have to be linked. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, I've got one last question for you. What if, like me, you wrote some books years ago? Is it too late to go back and release them as audiobooks? Like, is there still any point, or should you just be focusing on audio as a strategy for anything new?
I think there is a point. I mean, is your book still relevant? Is your book still relevant
I
to
think
your
so.
audience? Then I would say that there's a total point to do an audio version, and then actually you might just do a second launch of your book and drum up new excitement and be like, hey, all the people, because let's be real, we all have attention spans of gnats these days. So if you then do an audio version of your book and people go, oh, I forgot that book, and you could still then use all the great, hey, it's a 5-star Amazon bestseller. If it was, then you can use all of those profile boosting things again. And hey, see what people said who read the book. Now you get to hear it from me. How can you drum up more excitement with a product that you've already made in a way, even though, of course, you have to still make the audio version of the
That makes
book.
sense. Gives it a new lease of life. Awesome. If anyone's listening and they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
So they can connect with me. You can go on my website, elisabethvalentine.com. Remember, Elizabeth is with an S because I'm Danish.
And we'll pop it in the show notes so people can click through.
Yeah. Or connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. I'm quite sort of active on all of those.
Awesome. We'll pop links to those in the show notes. But just before we finish, tell us, you've got a course that's out now and you've got a book that's coming out. Tell us a little bit about both of those, and we'll also pop links to these in the show notes.
Yeah, so I made a course, How to Record an Audiobook, a step-by-step guide to bringing your audiobook to life. And it was because I was working with authors who were making their audiobook and were like, ugh, I'm an expert in what I'm talking about, but I'm not an expert in talking in front of the microphone. And for anyone of your listeners, I have done a special discount code. So if anyone is interested in the course, they can just pop in Beyond the Bio in one word, and then you get a very nice discount.
Awesome. So we'll pop a link to that also. And you've got a book coming out later in May.
Yeah, so the 21st of May, the book that I've written on this topic with the same title, How to Record an Audiobook, a Step-by-Step Guide to Bringing Your Audiobook
And
to
presumably,
Life.
is that coming out in audiobook version?
It is indeed. It will be a couple of weeks later, but yes, it is, of course. Because how can I write a book about audiobook and not have an audiobook?
I was going to say. Awesome. Well, we'll pop links to all of those things in the show notes. And thanks for being on the show.
You are so very welcome.
Thank you for listening. If you're serious about growing your profile, take our free profile assessment quiz to see where you're at right now and get hints and tips on how to improve your score. You'll find the link to the quiz in the show notes. If you've enjoyed the episode, it would be mint if you'd subscribe, like, and leave a review. See you next Monday.